Welcome to another episode of Mexican in the Kitchen. I'm starting this recipe by setting a small kitchen towel, and on top of that, I'm setting a chopping board. This is just not to hurt my table. If you have a hard and resistant working surface, then you probably don't need that. Then I need some plastic. In this case, I'm using a cut-off Ziploc bag because it's big enough and it doesn't stick. You can also use some kitchen plastic or whatever you prefer. For this recipe, I'm using chicken breasts, but you can also use chicken thighs, for example. Once I set my chicken, I'm going to close with another sheet of the plastic, and then I'm going to use my kitchen hammer with the flat part, and I'm just going to hit it very slowly, very gently. Try not to go too crazy with it, because if you hit it too hard, you might completely smash the chicken, and then you won't get a nice, thin, even steak. This might require a bit of practice. I messed up a couple of steaks while trying this for the first time, so it's perfectly normal. Just take your time and do it as slowly and gently as you can, evenly. It's better to give it a few hits than just one strong one. The reason why we are flattening our chicken is because it will cook faster. So try to make it thin and try to make it even so it cooks evenly. Once I'm done with the chicken breast, then I'm going to set it aside on a plate and I'm going to continue with the rest. This is one of those recipes where amounts are not so important. I will calculate this on the amount of steaks I want to make and by that amount of chicken pieces, and also on the size, because from one chicken breast you might make maybe 2 large steaks or 4 or 6 smaller ones. Once our chicken steaks are ready and we have them set aside, then we have to prepare for the breading. For that, we are going to set different plates. In the first one, I'm using some flour. The amount of flour depends on the amount of chicken you're going to make. Just make sure there's enough, but don't worry, if you need more, you can just add more as you go. This is all-purpose flour. In the second plate, I'm going to crack 3 eggs and I'm going to beat them. You can also add more eggs as you need. I'm going to start with 3 and then let's see how it goes. I've seen some people in Mexico add a splash of milk to the egg. Personally, I don't like that because I think it makes it more runny. But if you are someone who does that, then it's completely up to you. There's 1,000 variations on how to make breading, but this is the one I really like. On the third plate, I'm going to add some breadcrumbs. These are the plain normal breadcrumbs you can get from the store. You can also use some crushed cornflakes, you can use panko, you can use many other things, but this is how my mom used to make these milanesas, so that's the one I prefer. This is again completely up to you what kind of crumbs or coating you want to use. Breadcrumbs is also the most common way I've seen people make milanesas, at least back in my city. I'm also going to add some seasoning because so far we haven't seasoned anything. So I'm going to add some salt into the breadcrumbs. I'm also adding some paprika powder. It's smoked paprika. I will also add some garlic powder. I'm also adding a bit of black pepper, of course, freshly ground. Now I'm going to mix all of my seasoning into the breadcrumbs. I don't want to have just one steak with a lot of salt, one steak with a lot of paprika maybe. I want to try to be as thorough as I can and make sure everything is mixed evenly. While seasoning my breadcrumbs, I almost forgot that I also like having some oregano in there, so I'm adding a pinch of oregano and mixing again. I know some people don't love oregano in this recipe, and then there are some people that love it, so it's completely up to you. I personally like it. I always add a pinch of oregano. It gives a really nice flavor. Now that we have all of our ingredients ready, we have a really nice breading station. I'm going to take one of the chicken pieces and I'm going to throw it into the flour. The reason why we are starting with flour is because chicken is slippery, it's moist, and we want the flour to make a coating on our chicken. We want the flour to cover our chicken quite nicely, and then that will give us a layer so that when we throw the chicken into the egg will stick to it. Because I've seen some people back in Mexico, for example, that they just skip the flour and then the breading process is a bit more complicated. You might have to do it a couple times because the egg kind of slides off the chicken. It's just not as easy and you don't get such a even and pretty kind of breading. So now that we have covered our chicken, we can throw it into the egg. When we throw our chicken into the egg, we want the egg to cover everything because we need the egg to make the bread stick to our chicken. If you have seen my videos before, you might have noticed I always do the voiceover after. In this case, this is the first time I'm seeing how I was trying to do the breading. And this is because I have seen some tips for doing this breading a bit less messy. I've done this process maybe 1,000 times. I remember helping my mom doing this kind of thing a lot when I was a kid. But for some reason, I cannot help but being an absolute mess every time I make this process. I was checking some kind of tips, and they were saying that you should use one hand for the dry kind of ingredients and one hand for the wet ingredients, and then you can make the coating, not make a mess, everything's gonna be perfect. And I was trying to do that maybe for a second in the video, and then I was trying my best to make it look pretty and clean, but I'm not gonna lie, every time I've done this, it gets quite messy. So don't worry if you make a mess. Your table might be quite a mess after, so try to make it on a clean kitchen surface, not having any tablecloth or anything under, because I guarantee that the first time you make this, it is going to be messy. Once we have our egg coating and throw it on the breading, then you can see that we have a really nice coating on our chicken, and we can continue with a second piece and a third piece and just make everything until we are done. I've seen people make this kind of breading with some other recipes, especially when making fried chicken, like with the whole pieces. Some people might go for a second coat into the same piece, just repeat the process again on top of the first coating. I think in these ones, it's not really necessary. These ones will cook so fast, and the first coating is quite even, so there's no need. But of course, if you want to do it 2 times, it's completely up to you. As you can probably tell from the second piece, it's a way quicker process when you are not caring so much about making a mess. So I would say don't worry about it. Just cover all your chicken and then you can clean the mess after. Here I have some canola oil on the pan. I have warmed that to 180 Celsius, which is about 356 Fahrenheit. This frying process for these milanesas is quite quick. It's going to take about 2 minutes on each side. It might be even quicker depending on how thick your milanesas are. After a couple minutes, I'm going to flip my milanesa and give it another couple minutes. I don't want to leave it there for too long because I don't want the breading to either burn or for the milanesa to become a bit too dry. After a couple minutes, I'm going to take it out, set it aside, and continue frying my other milanesas. I have seen a lot of recipes and a lot of people set aside these kind of milanesas on a plate with some paper towels, but personally I don't love that because sometimes the paper just sticks to your milanesa and then it's annoying. I like having this kind of pot with a metal strainer and then I just set everything I fry in there. I think it's just nicer to have that kind of metal strainer and then have all the excess oil just drip into the pot. From here we just continue frying our milanesas until we are ready. Since I just recently bought an air fryer, and I know some people might not want to use that much oil, I'm going to make a little experiment. I've never tried these before. I'm kind of curious how it goes. I have this oil spray can. I'm going to spray my steak from one side, flip it, spray it again, and then I'm going to throw it into my air fryer. For temperature, I'm giving it 200 degrees Celsius, which is about 392 Fahrenheit. For time, I'm going to give it 5 minutes. We'll give it some time, and after those 5 minutes, we're just going to flip it and give it some more time. Once the time's up, we're going to flip our milanesa, then we're going to give it another 4 minutes on the same temperature. As you can tell, it's not exactly the same thing. They are both quite crispy, as I can show you. The flavor from both is quite good. It's not exactly the same, as of course you can tell. I think it's good enough if you want to cut some calories, maybe not use so much oil. And I think it's a good alternative if you want to make something for just one person or a couple people, then have a very quick something that you can make without making a mess on the stove. But of course, if you ask me about what I prefer, then I have to say I will go with the deep fried one. For serving, there's many different options. Personally, I like a bit of salad with a nice salad dressing. I made some tamarind salad dressing and then some French fries on the side. This is how I make this chicken milanesa or chicken schnitzel, as you might also call them. They are very nice. It's quite tender on the inside. It didn't get dry. It's very crispy on the outside. The flavor is really good. You can also make the same recipe with some beef or with some pork. People also do that. Pork is a bit cheaper usually. Beef is something that a lot of people prefer, but personally I think the chicken one has the best flavor overall, the best texture. And it's one of those ingredients that you can use in a sandwich, as we do in semitas in my city. Add some avocado, some of these milanesas. You can then add some cheese, some chipotles or pickled jalapenos. Makes a really nice sandwich. You can also serve it as I did, with a side salad and French fries. You can maybe eat it with some mustard and ketchup. You can also make a sauce. I've served it like that with some mushrooms, white wine kind of sauce. Very easy to use kind of ingredient, very easy to use as part of a dish, very easy to play with it, add different sauces, add different variations. Maybe you can play with the spices you add there. You can, when you're doing the spices on the breading, you can add maybe some cayenne pepper if you want a bit more of a kick, or other kind of chili, other kind of spices, make it your own. And I hope you'll try at home, press like, activate the bell, all those kind of things, and see you in the next one.